Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant and looked down at the planet below. The two suns of the Kepler 442 system made the world glow with golden light. 3 million humans lived on the surface in cities and farms that stretched across 3 continents. They had been there for 8 years now and had turned empty land into food that fed half the outer space colonies. Jake had visited the planet many times before. He knew the smell of the wheat fields and the sound of children playing in the streets. The colonists trusted him to keep them safe. They waved at his ship when it passed overhead. Some of them had named their children after him and his crew. Today felt different, though. The sensors showed nothing wrong, but Jake felt cold in his stomach. Something bad was coming, and he could feel it in his bones. The communication system crackled to life. Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the main screen from Earth Defense Command. Her face looked tired and worried. Behind her, Jake could see other officers running around with papers and data tablets. "Morrison, you need to get those people out of there right now," she said without any greeting. "Our spies in Zephyrian space say they are planning something big. The whole Third Fleet is moving toward your sector." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. The Zephyrians had been at war with humanity for 10 years. They were smart and strong, and their ships were better than human ships in many ways. But they had rules. They took prisoners. They moved civilians to other worlds instead of killing them. They wanted workers and slaves, not corpses. "Admiral, how much time do we have?" Jake asked while his crew started checking their weapons and shields. "Maybe 6 hours if we are lucky. Maybe less," Lisa said. "The evacuation ships from the 7th Fleet are 3 days away. You have what you have right there." Jake looked at his tactical officer, Lieutenant Dan Rivers. Dan had already pulled up the numbers. The Valiant could carry maybe 2,000 people if they packed them in tight. The other ships in Jake's small group could take another 8,000. There were some civilian transports in orbit that might hold 20,000 more. 30,000 people out of 3 million. 1%. "Admiral, what about the underground shelters?" Jake asked. "The colonists built them after the attack on New Geneva. They can hold the whole population for weeks." Lisa shook her head. "Morrison, those shelters were built for storms and earthquakes, not orbital bombardment. If the Zephyrians want those people dead, the shelters won't help." "But they don't kill civilians," Jake said. "They never have. Every colony they take, they move the people somewhere else. They need workers for their mines and factories." "Intelligence says this time is different," Lisa replied. "They are calling it Operation Clean Sweep. Our sources think they plan to kill everyone and take the empty worlds." Jake looked down at the planet again. In the main city of New Hope, he could see the lights starting to come on as evening approached. Families were sitting down for dinner. Children were doing homework. People were living normal lives and had no idea that death might be coming from the stars. "Sir," said his communications officer, Emma Rodriguez. "I have Governor Phillips on the line from the surface." "Put him through," Jake said. Governor Tom Phillips appeared on a smaller screen. He was a big man with gray hair who had been a farmer before he became the leader of the colony. "Commander Morrison, we are picking up long-range signals that look like ships. Should we be worried?" Jake looked at the man who had invited him to dinner with his family just last month. Tom's wife Betty made the best apple pie on the planet. Their daughter Lucy was only 12 years old and wanted to be a starship captain when she grew up. "Governor, I need you to activate the emergency protocols right now," Jake said. "Get everyone to the underground shelters as fast as you can. Don't pack anything, just go." Tom's face went pale. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 4 hours, maybe less." "What?" "About evacuation." Jake felt the words stick in his throat. "The ships can't get here in time, Tom. The shelters are your best chance." After the transmission ended, Jake stood in silence for a long moment. His crew watched him and waited for orders. They all knew the math. They all knew what the smart choice was. Take the government officials and the most important people and run. Leave the rest behind and hope for the best. But Jake had made a promise to these people. He had told them he would keep them safe. He had looked their children in the eyes and sworn that no harm would come to them while he was on watch. "Sir," said Lieutenant Rivers quietly, "the smart play is to evacuate who we can and pull back. We can't save them all." We can try, Jake said. Signal all ships, we stay and fight. Maybe the Zephyrians will see we are here and decide the planet is too costly to attack. Maybe they will just take prisoners like always. Emma Rodriguez turned to him with worry in her eyes. Sir, what if Admiral Carter is right? What if this time they plan to kill everyone? Jake looked at the planet one more time. Somewhere down there, Lucy Phillips was probably asking her father why they had to go to the dark shelters. Somewhere down there, families were holding each other and hoping the nice Commander Morrison would keep them safe like he always did. Then we fight until we can't fight anymore, he said. And we pray that our sacrifice means something. The Zephyrian fleet came out of hyperspace 4 hours later. 50 ships against Jake's 5. The battle lasted 30 minutes. The Valiant died fighting, but it was not enough. The bombardment of the planet lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 3 million people were dead. The last transmission from the surface was a child's voice saying, "Mommy, why are the stars falling down?" Jake Morrison survived because his escape pod was picked up by a human patrol ship 3 days later. He would live for 30 more years, but he would never forgive himself for the choice he made that day. Neither would humanity. Admiral Ben Parker had seen many terrible things in his 40 years of military service. He had fought in the Centauri Wars where whole space stations were destroyed. He had commanded ships during the Machine Rebellion when artificial intelligence tried to wipe out all organic life. He thought he knew what war looked like, but sitting in the war room on Earth watching the footage from Kepler 442 made him feel sick to his stomach. The recording came from a military satellite that survived the attack. It showed the Zephyrian ships arriving and positioning themselves around the planet. It showed the brief space battle where Jake Morrison's small fleet tried to fight. It showed the orbital bombardment that turned cities into glass and farms into ash. The worst part was the audio. The satellite had picked up the last transmissions from the surface. Parents calling for their children. Emergency workers reporting that the shelters were collapsing. And at the very end, that small voice asking why the stars were falling. President. Helen Brooks sat at the head of the table. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her eyes were hard as steel. She had been in office for 6 years and had always tried to find peaceful solutions to problems. Today she looked like someone who had run out of patience with peace. "How long until we can move the full fleet?" she asked without looking away from the screen. 6 weeks for complete deployment, Ben answered. "But Madam President, I have to ask, if we are really going to declare total war on the Zephyrian Empire, once we do that there is no going back." Helen turned to look at him. "Admiral, they declared war on us when they murdered 3 million civilians. Commander Morrison made a tactical error based on old information about how Zephyrians fight wars. They chose to kill innocent people instead of taking them prisoner. That changes everything." Captain Ryan Foster was young and new to the command staff. He had just come back from the frontier worlds where he had been fighting small battles against pirates and raiders. "Madam President, what about the rules of war? The Galactic Council has laws about proportional response." Helen stood up and walked to the big window that looked out over the city of Geneva. "Captain, what is proportional response to the murder of 3 million civilians?" Ryan thought for a moment. "Well, I guess it would be 3 million Zephyrian civilians." Helen finished for him. "But that would make us just as bad as them, wouldn't it?" "Yes, ma'am. So we have 2 choices," Helen said, still looking out the window. "We can be just as bad as them, or we can be worse. I choose worse." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what the president was saying, but no one wanted to be the first to speak the words out loud. General Patricia Adams finally broke the silence. "Madam President, are you ordering the complete destruction of the Zephyrian Empire?" "I'm ordering the end of the Zephyrian Empire as a threat to human life," Helen said. "How we accomplish that is up to the military." Ben Parker looked around the table at the other officers. Some looked excited. Some looked scared. All of them looked determined. "Madam President, the Zephyrian Empire has over 20 billion citizens, spread across 17 worlds. If we attack all of them, then 20 billion Zephyrians will learn what happens when you murder human children," Helen said. She turned back to face the table. "Gentlemen and ladies, I want every ship we have ready for combat. I want every weapon we can build. I want the Zephyrians to see us coming from 1,000 light years away. And I want them to be afraid, Captain. Foster raised his hand again. Ma'am, what do we tell the crews? How do we explain why we are attacking civilian targets? Helen walked back to her chair and sat down. She picked up a data tablet and started typing. You tell them exactly what happened. Here, you show them this footage. You let them hear that child's voice asking why the stars are falling. And then you tell them that we are going to make sure no human child ever has to ask that question again. Within 2 hours, every human military base from Earth to the edge of known space received the same message. It was short and simple and broadcast, on every frequency and every language that humans knew. The Zephyrian Empire has murdered 3 million human civilians, including women and children. Effective immediately, all Zephyrian military and government targets are designated as hostile. All Zephyrian civilian populations are designated as enemy non-combatants. Human forces will show the same mercy to Zephyrian civilians that they showed. 2 hours. We are coming. The message was picked up by Zephyrian listening posts within hours. It was translated and sent to the Zephyrian High Command. For the first time in their history, the Zephyrians realized they had made a terrible mistake. The Zephyrian Empire had fought many wars. They had conquered dozens of species. They had always been smart about it, though. They took what they wanted and left enough survivors to work for them. They never pushed anyone so far that they chose mutual destruction over surrender. They had not understood that humans were different. They had not realized that humans would rather burn down the galaxy than let the murder of their children go unpunished. In the Zephyrian capital city of Nexus Prime, the High Council met in emergency session. Supreme Commander Vexhai had been the one who ordered the attack on Kepler 442. He had thought that killing 3 million humans would send a message that resistance was futile. How many ships do the humans have? He asked his intelligence officer. Approximately 800 warships of various classes, came the reply, plus support vessels and civilian craft that could be converted. And our fleet, 350 ships total. But ours are individually more powerful. Vexhai felt confident. The humans were angry, but they were outnumbered. Then we wait for them to come and we destroy them in detail. This war will be over in 6 months. But Vexhai had made the same mistake that led to the attack on Kepler 442. He was thinking like a rational military commander who fought wars to achieve political goals. He did not understand that humanity was no longer interested in rational warfare. 3 weeks later, the first human scouts appeared in Zephyrian space. They did not try to hide. They broadcast the same message over and over on all frequencies. We are coming. The Zephyrian border patrol ships that tried to intercept them were destroyed without warning. No prisoners were taken. No surrender was accepted. The human ships simply killed everything they found and moved on. The hunt had begun, and the Zephyrians were about to learn what it meant to be prey. Fleet Admiral Karen Wells stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution and watched the largest fleet in human history gather around Earth. 800 ships of war floated in perfect formation, stretching from the moon to the outer asteroid belt. Each ship carried enough weapons to crack a planet's surface. Together, they carried enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. Karen had been fighting wars for 25 years, but she had never seen anything like this. The shipyards of Earth and Mars had worked without stopping for 6 weeks. Every weapon that human science could create had been loaded onto these ships. Plasma cannons that could melt through mountains, nuclear missiles that could turn cities into glass, kinetic bombardment systems that could throw chunks of metal at near light speed. Dr. Chris Bailey stood beside her looking at data reports. He was the fleet's expert on alien biology and psychology. His job was to help the fleet understand how Zephyrians thought and how they might react to human attacks. Admiral, I have finished studying the intelligence reports on Zephyrian population centers, he said quietly. Zephyr Prime has 12 billion inhabitants. Most of them are civilians who work in factories and farms. Their 3 colony worlds have another 8 billion. If we attack all of them, we will be killing 20 billion sentient beings. Karen did not look away from the fleet. Doctor, those 20 billion sentient beings stood by and watched. while their government murdered 3 million human children. They celebrated when the news reached their worlds. They called it a great victory. But Admiral, most of them probably had no idea what their military was planning. The average Zephyrian citizen knows as much about military operations as the average human citizen knows about our plans. Karen finally turned to look at the doctor. He was a good man who had spent his life studying alien cultures. He believed that most conflicts came from misunderstandings that could be solved with better communication. Today, his beliefs were going to be tested. "Dr. Bailey, do you have children?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. 2 daughters." "How old?" 8 and 10. Karen nodded. "So does Admiral Parker. So does President Brooks. So do most of the officers in this fleet. We all have children, and we all heard that little girl on Kepler 442 asking why the stars were falling. We all know that could have been our daughters." She turned back to look at the fleet. "The Zephyrians want to know what happens when you murder human children. We are going to show them." The first target was Zephyr Outpost 7. It was a mining station in an asteroid field far from any major population center. 4,000 Zephyrians worked there pulling rare metals from the rocks. It was not important strategically, but it was isolated and undefended. The human fleet appeared out of hyperspace like avenging angels. The mining station's commander tried to surrender immediately. He broadcast on all frequencies that they were civilians and non-combatants. He begged for mercy. His surrender offer was received by every ship in the human fleet. It was acknowledged and filed in the computer systems. Then it was ignored. The station was destroyed in 30 seconds. 4,000 Zephyrians became expanding, clouds of vapor and debris. No life pods were launched. No survivors were rescued. The human fleet moved on to the next target without slowing down. News of the attack reached Zephyr Prime within hours. The High Council called an emergency meeting. Supreme Commander Vex High could not believe what he was hearing. "They destroyed a civilian mining station," he said to his advisors. 4,000 innocent workers. This must be some kind of mistake." "No, mistake, sir," replied Intelligence Director Kethmar. "We intercepted their communications. The human fleet commander acknowledged the surrender offer and destroyed the station anyway. They are deliberately targeting non-military installations." Vex High felt something cold in his stomach. He had fought many wars against many species, but he had never seen anything like this. Even the most aggressive races followed some kind of rules. They took prisoners, they accepted surrenders, they distinguished between soldiers and civilians. "Send a message to the human fleet," he ordered. "Tell them we are willing to negotiate. Tell them we will pay compensation for the deaths on Kepler 442. Tell them we will turn over the officers responsible for the attack." The message was sent on all frequencies and in all human languages. It was received by the UES Retribution as, "The human fleet prepared to attack Zephyr Minor." Admiral Wells read the message aloud to her command staff. When she finished, the bridge was silent for a long moment. "Sir," said Captain Steve Mitchell, who commanded the ground forces. "They are offering to negotiate. Maybe we should consider." Karen looked at him with dead eyes. "Captain, what did we tell them we were going to do? Show them the same mercy they showed us, ma'am." "And how much mercy did they show the children on Kepler 442? "None, ma'am." "Then we negotiate after every Zephyrian world looks like Kepler 442 does now." Zephyr Minor was an agricultural world with 2 billion inhabitants. Most of them were farmers who grew food for the rest of the empire. They had never seen military action, and their world had no defenses except for a few patrol ships. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in battle formation. The orbital bombardment began immediately. Cities disappeared in balls of nuclear fire. Farms were turned to radioactive wasteland. Mountains were shattered by kinetic strikes. Captain Mitchell led the ground assault after the bombardment ended. His troops found only smoking ruins and scattered survivors hiding in caves and bunkers. The lucky ones had died quickly in the first attacks. The unlucky ones were slowly dying from radiation poisoning. "Command, this is Ground Team Alpha." Mitchell reported over the radio. His voice sounded hollow and distant. "No military targets detected. This was just farms and homes and schools." Confirmed. Captain Admiral Wells replied from orbit. Proceed to sweep and clear operations. Ma'am, there are survivors down here, mostly children and elderly civilians. They are badly injured and asking for medical help. The radio was quiet for a moment. Then Admiral Wells spoke again. Captain, what are your orders regarding Zephyrian survivors? Mitchell closed his eyes. He knew what his orders were. Every human soldier in the fleet knew what their orders were. Show the same mercy that was shown on Kepler 442. No survivors, ma'am. By the end of the first week, 6 Zephyrian worlds had been reduced to dead rocks. 15 billion sentient beings had been killed. The survivors in the remaining systems began calling it the human rage. They told stories to their children about the terrible time when humanity abandoned all reason and became something worse than any nightmare. On Earth, President Brooks received reports of each attack. She read them alone in her office late at night. She knew that history would remember her as a monster. She knew that what humanity was doing would haunt them for generations. But every night she also listened to the recording from Kepler 442. Every night she heard that little girl asking why the stars were falling. And every night she sent orders to Admiral Wells to continue the attacks. The galaxy was about to learn that there were some lines you could not cross without paying a price that destroyed both the victim and the victor. General Amanda Hayes stood on the balcony of what used to be the Zephyrian Imperial Palace and looked out over the ruins of Nexus Prime. The once proud capital of the Zephyrian Empire was now a collection of refugee camps surrounded by human military bases. 12 billion Zephyrians had lived here before the war. Now fewer than 300 million remained alive. The air still smelled of smoke and death, even though the fighting had ended 6 months ago. In the distance, Amanda could see the burned remains of the Great Pyramid, where the Zephyrian High Council had met for 1,000 years. Her troops had blown it up on the first day of the occupation, just to make a point. Below her in the main plaza, thousands of Zephyrians stood in long lines waiting for food and water. They moved slowly and kept their eyes down. Their natural blue skin had turned gray from malnutrition and stress. They looked like ghosts of their former selves. Private Danny White climbed the stairs to the balcony carrying a data tablet. He was young and had joined the military after Kepler 442, because he wanted to fight the aliens who killed human children. Now he looked older than his 22 years, and his eyes had seen too much. General, the delegation from Sector 7 is here for the daily report, he said quietly. Amanda looked down at the group of Zephyrians waiting at the bottom of the stairs. She recognized Elder Kethmar, who used to be the prime minister of their government. Before the war, he had lived in a palace with 1,000 servants. Now he wore torn clothes and begged humans for basic supplies. Behind him stood Dr. Yelthin, who had once been the Empire's greatest scientist. She had invented faster-than-light communication and won prizes for her work. Now she organized work gangs to clear rubble from the streets. "Send them up," Amanda said. The 3 Zephyrians climbed the stairs slowly. They were careful not to make any sudden movements. In the early days of the occupation, some Zephyrians had been shot for walking too fast or looking at human soldiers the wrong way. General Hayes, Elder Kethmar, said in his broken English, "Thank you for seeing us. We have come to make a request." Amanda did not look at him. She kept staring out at the refugee camps. "What do you want, Elder?" "The children in Sector 7 have not received protein rations in 3 days. They are showing signs of malnutrition. Some of the youngest ones are becoming very sick." Amanda finally turned to look at the former prime minister. He was a tall Zephyrian with the traditional head crest that marked him as nobility. The crest had been broken during his arrest and never properly healed. It made him look defeated and pathetic. "Elder, your people turned 3 million human children into ash," she said in a flat voice. "Our children are well fed. Yours will eat when it is convenient for us." Dr. Yelthin stepped forward carefully. She was smaller than the male Zephyrians, and her voice was soft and respectful. "General, we understand your anger. What happened at Kepler 442 was wrong. It was criminal. But these children had nothing to do with that decision. They were not even born when the war started. Neither were the children on Kepler 442, Amanda replied, but they are dead anyway. The third member of the delegation was a younger Zephyrian named Velkar. He had been a teacher before the war, and now he helped run the orphanages in the refugee camps. He was shaking as he spoke. General, please. We have over 10,000 orphaned children in Sector 7 alone. They cry for their parents who died in the bombardment. They ask why the humans hate them so much. What am I supposed to tell them? Amanda looked at the young teacher for a long moment. She could see the desperation in his large black eyes. She had seen that same look in human eyes on colony worlds that were attacked by raiders or pirates. The look of someone watching children suffer and being powerless to help them. Tell them the truth, she said finally. Tell them that their parents' government murdered 3 million human children. Tell them that actions have consequences. Tell them that they are alive because humans choose to let them live, and that choice could change at any time. Elder Kethmar tried one more time. General, what would it take for you to increase the food rations? We could offer information about hidden weapon caches. We could help identify war criminals who are hiding among the civilians. We could provide technical knowledge about our manufacturing systems. I don't want your information or your help, Amanda said. I want you to remember every single day that you exist only because I allow it. I want you to wake up every morning, grateful that humans have decided not to finish what we started. I want your children to grow up knowing that the species that destroyed their civilization is the same species that keeps them alive. After the delegation left, Amanda stood alone on the balcony. Private White remained at attention near the stairs. Finally, he spoke quietly. Ma'am, permission to speak freely. Granted, are we the good guys anymore? Amanda thought about the question. Before the war, she had been a career soldier who believed in protecting the innocent and following the rules of warfare. She had fought pirates and criminals and always tried to minimize civilian casualties. Now she commanded an occupation force that controlled the lives of 300 million sentient beings. Every day she decided who lived and who died. Every day she watched children starve because their parents had been on the wrong side of a war they did not start. I don't know, soldier, she said honestly. I honestly don't know. That night, Amanda sat in her quarters reading reports from the other occupation zones. The pattern was the same everywhere. Zephyrian civilians living in camps and begging for basic supplies. Human soldiers trying to maintain order among a population that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. Everyone waiting for orders from Earth about what to do next. She opened her personal computer and started typing a message to her sister back on Earth. Lisa was a teacher who worked with refugee children from various conflicts. She had always been the moral center of their family. Lisa, she wrote, I know I have not written in months. Things here are complicated. We won the war, but I am not sure we won anything worth having. Every day I make decisions that would have horrified me before this started. Every day I become a little more like the enemy we came here to fight. She deleted the message without sending it. What was the point of asking for forgiveness from someone who would never understand what war did to the people who fought it? Instead, she opened the file containing the audio recording from Kepler 442. She listened to the last transmission from the surface. The child's voice asking why the stars were falling. She had listened to it every night for 6 months. The voice reminded her why they were here. It reminded her what the Zephyrians had done to innocent humans. It reminded her that some crimes were so terrible that justice and mercy became impossible. But it also reminded her of the Zephyrian children in Sector 7 who were crying for parents who would never come home. Children who had done nothing wrong except being born on the wrong planet at the wrong time. Amanda closed the file and prepared for bed. Tomorrow she would make more decisions about life and death. Tomorrow she would continue the slow process of destroying a civilization while keeping its people alive. Tomorrow she would remain the monster that humanity had created to fight other monsters. Outside her window, the refugee camps stretched to the horizon. 300 million Zephyrians trying to survive in the ruins of their own world. All of them dependent on the mercy of the species that had destroyed everything they ever loved. They were alive, but Amanda wondered if that was really better than being dead. 5 years after the fall of Zephyr Prime, Ambassador Tony Clark stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Harmony Station. The Great Assembly Hall was filled with representatives from 47 different species. Some looked like humans, while others were so alien that they needed special equipment just to survive in the same atmosphere. The hall was built to impress visitors with its size and beauty. The walls were made of crystal that showed images of peaceful worlds and successful diplomatic agreements. The ceiling displayed a map of the galaxy, with all the member worlds marked in soft blue light. It was meant to be a place where different species could come together and solve problems with words instead of weapons. Today it felt more like a courtroom where humanity was on trial for its soul. Tony had been a diplomat for 30 years before the war. He had helped negotiate trade agreements and peace treaties. He believed that most conflicts could be solved if people just talked to each other long enough. The war with the Zephyrians had changed his beliefs about many things. Behind him sat Captain Rodriguez, who had commanded a destroyer during the final assault on Zephyr Prime. Next to her was General Hayes, who had volunteered to attend the hearing, even though she no longer held active command. They had come to face whatever judgment the galaxy would pass on humanity. The Altarian delegate spoke first. The Altarians were crystalline beings who communicated through sound vibrations that the universal translators turned into words. Ambassador, Clark, the Council has completed its investigation into humanity's conduct during the Zephyrian War. Our findings are disturbing. Tony stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber was focused on him. He could feel the weight of their judgment like a physical force pressing down on his shoulders. 20 billion sentient beings are dead, the Altarian continued. 17 worlds are uninhabitable for the next 1,000 years. The survivors speak of concentration camps and forced labor and systematic starvation. They tell stories that will give their children nightmares for generations. The Corvan delegate spoke next. The Corvans were an old reptilian species that had been mediating galactic conflicts since before humans discovered fire. Ambassador, we have seen wars before. We have seen genocide and ethnic cleansing and the worst that sentient beings can do to each other. But we have never seen anything like what humanity did to the Zephyrian Empire. Tony listened to the accusations without defending himself. Everything they said was true. Humanity had done terrible things during the war. They had become something worse than the enemies they fought. Honored delegates, he said when the formal charges were finished. Humanity does not contest the facts as presented. We killed 20 billion Zephyrians. We destroyed their worlds. We reduced their survivors to refugees in their own star systems. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some delegates called for sanctions against humanity. Others demanded that human leaders be turned over for trial as war criminals. A few suggested that humanity should be expelled from galactic civilization entirely. The presiding arbiter called for order. The arbiters were tall blue beings from the VAC system, who had been neutral in every major conflict for the past 10,000 years. Their job was to keep the peace and make sure everyone got a fair hearing. The chamber will come to order, the arbiter announced. Ambassador Clark, you may continue. Tony waited for the noise to die down. I asked the council to remember why we did what we did. 3 million human civilians were murdered without warning or provocation. Children were vaporized in their beds. Families were reduced to atoms while seeking shelter. The Corvan delegate hissed through the translator. The actions of one military commander do not justify genocide, human. You are right, Tony agreed. This surprised everyone in the chamber, including his own delegation. They don't justify what we did. Nothing justifies what we did. We became monsters to fight monsters, and now we have to live with what we became. He activated a holographic display that showed the former Zephyrian territories. We could offer excuses. We could claim we were seeking justice. We could argue military necessity. But the truth is simpler and more terrible than any of those explanations. The hologram showed images of the refugee camps on the surviving Zephyrian worlds. Millions of aliens living in temporary shelters under human guard. Children who had never known freedom. Adults who remembered when their species ruled an empire and now begged for food from their conquerors. We discovered that when humanity loses everything, we become something worse than death itself. We become something that makes survival a punishment rather than a gift. Tony paused and looked around the chamber. He could see fear in the eyes of many delegates. Not fear of human weapons or human ships, but fear of what humans were capable of becoming when pushed too far. Today, 300 million Zephyrians live under human protection. They are fed and clothed and housed and safe. They are also constantly reminded that they exist only because we allow it. Every day they wake up knowing that the species that destroyed their civilization is the same one keeping them alive. General Hayes stood up behind him. Her voice carried clearly across the silent chamber. The Zephyrians who survived our rage tell their children stories. Not stories of human cruelty or human violence, but stories of human mercy. Because the most terrifying thing about humanity is not that we can destroy worlds. It is that we can choose not to, and make you grateful for that choice every single day for the rest of your life. The Galactic Council deliberated for 3 days. When they returned with their verdict, the chamber was packed with reporters and observers from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to see how civilized space would deal with humanity's crimes. The presiding arbiter read the decision. The Council finds that humanity has violated every law of warfare and committed crimes against sentient life on a scale never before seen in galactic history. However, the Council also recognizes that humanity's actions were a response to an unprovoked attack on civilian populations. Tony felt his heart sink. The Council was going to try to find some middle ground that satisfied no one and solved nothing. Therefore, the arbiter continued, humanity will be placed under diplomatic isolation for 50 years. During this time, humans will be solely responsible for the welfare of all surviving Zephyrians. No aid will be provided by the galactic community. No trade agreements will be honored. No diplomatic contact will be maintained. The chamber erupted, again, but this time in confusion rather than anger. The Council was not punishing humanity by taking the Zephyrians away. They were punishing humanity by forcing them to take care of the people they had destroyed. After the session ended, the elderly Corvin delegate approached Tony privately. Ambassador, why did your people accept this judgment? You have the military strength to reject our authority entirely. Tony looked back at the empty chamber where humanity had just been sentenced to 50 years of isolation. Because, honored delegate, we learned something worse than the fear of dying. We learned the fear of who we become when we refuse to die. And what does that make humanity? Tony smiled grimly as he prepared to leave Harmony Station. Something worse than monsters, delegate. It makes us gods, and that is a burden no species should have to carry. The transport ship lifted off from the station, carrying the human delegation back to their isolated corner of the galaxy. For the next 50 years, they would be alone with the consequences of their choices. 300 million Zephyrians would depend on human mercy for survival. 300 million living reminders of what humanity was capable of when pushed beyond all reason. In the depths of space, the automated beacon from Kepler 442 continued to broadcast its signal. Every day it sent out the same message across the galaxy. The last words of a little girl asking why the stars were falling. Now anyone who received that signal would know the answer. The stars fell because humanity would not let them stand. Stars fell because some crimes were so terrible that mercy became more frightening than vengeance. The stars fell because the galaxy had learned too late that there were worse things than dying. The human ships disappeared into hyperspace carrying their burden of victory. Behind them, Harmony Station continued its work of keeping peace between the stars. But everyone knew that peace was more fragile now. Everyone knew that there were species in the galaxy who would choose mutual destruction over surrender. Everyone knew that humanity had shown them all what it meant to survive something worse than death.